My name is Daniel, and I never thought my biggest enemy would be my own brother. Growing up, Mark always had this way of making me feel small, whether it was stealing credit for my ideas or turning our parents against me with lies. Still, I thought family meant loyalty. I thought blood meant something. I was wrong. Things turned worse when I married Emily. She was the love of my life, or at least I believed so. For the first few years, I was happy. We built a home together, and I trusted both her and Mark completely. They seemed to get along well, too well, but I brushed off my suspicions as paranoia. After all, who would betray me like that? It started with little things. Mark would show up uninvited at our house, and Emily never seemed to mind. Sometimes she laughed at his jokes in a way she never did with mine. I'd catch her glancing at him when she thought I wasn't looking. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was insecure. But deep down, my gut was screaming the truth. One night, I came home early from work. The house was quiet, the lights dim. I walked upstairs and heard voices, hers and his. My chest tightened as I opened the bedroom door. There they were. My wife and my brother, the two people I trusted most, tangled in the very bed I had bought for our marriage. I can't even describe the kind of rage and heartbreak that hit me all at once. It wasn't just betrayal, it was annihilation. My whole life collapsed in a single moment. Emily gasped, covering herself, while Mark had the audacity to smirk at me like he had won. I didn't yell. I didn't attack. I just stood there, shaking, my hands clenched so tight they bled. "Why?" I finally asked. Emily cried, saying it just happened, that she didn't mean for it to go this far. Mark, on the other hand, had no shame. He said I was too soft, too boring, that Emily needed a real man. That was it. That was the moment I realized my brother hadn't just ruined parts of my life. He had been waiting for the chance to take everything from me. And he almost did. I filed for divorce immediately. It was messy, painful, and humiliating. But I refused to let them destroy what was left of me. Emily tried to come back later, begging for forgiveness. But there was no going back. As for Mark, I cut him out entirely. No calls, no visits, nothing. He was dead to me. It's been years now, but the scars remain. I've built myself up again, stronger than before. But sometimes, late at night, the memory of that betrayal still burns. The lesson? Family isn't always loyal. And sometimes the people closest to you are the ones sharpening the knife behind your back. After the divorce papers were signed, I felt like I was walking through life as a ghost. Everything I had built, my marriage, my home, even my trust in family, was shattered. I moved out of the house and into a small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and at least I could breathe without choking on the memories of betrayal. Mark and Emily didn't even try to hide their relationship after that. Word spread quickly through the family, and while some relatives tried to stay neutral, others looked at me with pity. My parents, though they broke me the most. Instead of cutting Mark off for what he had done, they made excuses for him. "He didn't mean to hurt you," they'd say. "You need to forgive your brother." Forgive? Forgive the man who stabbed me in the back and laughed about it? It felt like I was being betrayed all over again, not just by Emily, not just by Mark, but by the very people who raised me. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the pain, with long hours and exhaustion. Slowly, things began to change. My boss noticed my determination and gave me a promotion. I started saving money, planning trips, and meeting new people who didn't know anything about my past. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life again. But then Mark showed up. One evening, I found him waiting outside my apartment building. He looked rough, unshaven, desperate, like the smirk had finally been wiped off his face. He asked if we could talk. Against my better judgment, I let him. He admitted Emily had left him. Apparently, after destroying my life to be with him, she had grown tired of his arrogance and constant lies. She walked out, and now he was alone. He wanted forgiveness. He wanted me to let him back into my life, as if an apology could erase everything he had taken from me. I looked him in the eyes and said, "You burned every bridge. You're not my brother anymore. You're just a stranger who once shared my last name." And then I walked away, leaving him standing there in the cold. For the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Weeks passed after that encounter, and I kept waiting for the weight of my decision to crush me, but it never did. In fact, I felt lighter. For once, my life wasn't about carrying the shame of Mark's choices or Emily's betrayal. It was about me. I poured my energy into rebuilding. I started hitting the gym, not just for my body, but for my mind. The more I pushed myself, the more I realized how much I had let their actions define me. I refused to be their victim anymore. Soon, I looked in the mirror and didn't just see a man who had been broken. I saw someone sharper, stronger, unrecognizable to the old Daniel. One night, at a networking event for work, I met Claire. She was confident, kind, and carried herself with the kind of honesty I thought no longer existed. We talked for hours, and for the first time in years, I laughed without bitterness. I didn't tell her my whole story, at least not then, but she saw something in me I thought I had lost. Meanwhile, news about Mark trickled back to me through family. He had started drinking heavily, lost his job, and was bouncing from couch to couch. My parents tried to guilt me into helping him, but I stood firm. Every time they said, "He's your brother," I reminded them, he made his choice when he betrayed me. Then one night, out of nowhere, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Mark. His voice was slurred, and he begged me to meet him. Against my instincts, I went. When I arrived, I found him sitting outside a rundown bar, his head in his hands, a shell of the man who once smirked at me with my wife in our bed. "Everything I touch falls apart," he muttered. "You were right to cut me off. I don't have anyone left." For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the look in his eyes that night, the smugness, the cruelty, the way he reveled in my pain. And that pity turned to steel. I told him, "You created this. You destroyed everything. Not me. Don't call me again." Then I turned and walked away, the sound of him shouting my name fading behind me. It was the last time I ever looked back. Claire became the turning point I didn't know I needed. She wasn't just someone to distract me from the past. She challenged me to think about the future. With her, I felt seen in a way I never had before. We started spending more time together, and slowly, she pulled me out of the shadows I had been living in. At first, I was scared to tell her about Mark and Emily. How do you explain a betrayal that deep without sounding broken? But one evening over dinner, I finally laid it all out. The marriage, the affair, the night I caught them, even the fallout with my parents. I expected her to look at me differently, maybe even pity me. Instead, she reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "Daniel, that's not who you are. That's what they did. Don't carry their sins as your identity." Her words stuck. For the first time, I truly believed I could be more than just the man who'd been betrayed. Meanwhile, Mark's downfall only grew darker. I heard from a cousin that he had been arrested for a drunken fight. Another time, I saw him wandering downtown, ragged and angry, like a ghost of the man he used to be. Each time I heard about him, I felt nothing. No hate, no pity, just emptiness. He had burned himself out. One afternoon, my parents came to my apartment unannounced. They pleaded with me to help Mark, to give him money, to let him get back on his feet. I looked them in the eye and said calmly, "The day he betrayed me with Emily, he stopped being my brother. If you want to help him, that's your choice. But don't ever ask me to sacrifice myself for him again." It was hard, but I finally drew the line. I realized that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, trust, and respect. And Mark had given me none of that. Claire smiled at me that night when I told her what happened. "You finally chose yourself," she said. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Life with Claire started to feel like a second chance. She had this way of grounding me, reminding me that the past didn't have to dictate my future. Together, we traveled, tried new things, and built a rhythm that was nothing like the hollow marriage I once had. I finally began to picture a life where happiness wasn't temporary. Work flourished, too. The promotion I'd earned, turned into a leadership position, and for the first time, I had influence, respect, and financial stability. Every milestone felt like proof that I could rise higher, even after being torn down so brutally. But just as things began to stabilize, Mark reappeared in the ugliest way possible. One evening, Claire and I came home from dinner to find him waiting outside my building. He looked thinner, his eyes wild, like a man barely holding himself together. "Daniel, please," he begged. "I've lost everything. Emily's gone. Mom and Dad won't stop yelling at me. I don't have anyone left but you." Claire squeezed my hand, but she didn't say a word. It was my decision to make. I stared at him, and for a moment I saw flashes of our childhood. Two boys who once shared toys, secrets, and dreams. But those images were buried beneath the memory of betrayal, the smirk he wore as he destroyed my marriage. "Mark," I said quietly, "you had me once. You had a brother who would have done anything for you, and you threw it away. I'm done saving you. Save yourself." His face twisted between anger and despair, but I didn't waver. Claire and I walked past him into the building, leaving him standing in the cold, just like before. This time, though, I felt no hesitation, no doubt. For the first time in years, I knew exactly who I was and who I wasn't. I was no longer the man defined by his betrayal. I was Daniel, and I was finally free to live. Months passed without another sign of Mark, and in that silence, I found peace. Claire and I grew closer, our lives intertwining in ways that felt natural and steady. I realized she wasn't just someone who had walked into my life. She was the person I wanted to build the rest of it with. One evening, on a quiet beach trip we had planned together, I proposed. Claire's eyes lit up with tears as she said yes, and in that moment, I felt like all the broken pieces of my past had finally been reshaped into something whole. But peace never lasts forever. Not long after our engagement, Mark came crashing back into my life one final time. This time, it wasn't begging, it was rage. He showed up at my workplace, yelling in the lobby, accusing me of stealing the life that should have been his. Security had to drag him out, and I watched, stunned, as he fought against them, screaming my name. It was pathetic, but also dangerous. I realized then that Mark wasn't just broken, he was poisonous. His downfall had turned him bitter, and he couldn't stand to see me thriving when his life had crumbled. Later that night, I got a call from my parents. They were distraught, embarrassed, and angry not at him but at me. They said I was cruel for not helping him when he needed it most, that I had abandoned my own brother. I told them the truth. He abandoned me long before I ever walked away. Then I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to them. Choosing Claire, choosing myself, meant finally cutting every tie that dragged me backward. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. When Claire and I walked down the aisle months later, I felt no sadness for who wasn't there. I looked at her, at the life we were stepping into, and realized that family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes, it's the one you choose. And I chose her. Married life with Claire was everything I thought love was supposed to be but never had before. Steady, honest, and safe. We moved into a home together. Nothing extravagant, but filled with warmth. I'd wake up every morning to her laughter, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Work thrived too. I was leading projects, mentoring younger employees, and even starting to think about opening my own firm someday. It felt like every part of my life was finally aligning, piece by piece, into something I could be proud of. But as my life grew brighter, news of Mark's decline only grew darker. Through whispers from distant relatives, I heard he'd been arrested again, this time for theft. Later, someone mentioned he was bouncing between shelters, a man everyone had once seen as charming now reduced to nothing. One evening I sat on the porch with Claire, watching the sunset, and I confessed something. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty, I admitted. If maybe I should have helped him, even after everything. Claire turned to me, her hand resting on mine. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. He made his choices, Daniel. You made yours. Look where they led. Her words anchored me. It wasn't about cruelty, it was about survival. Mark had chosen betrayal, arrogance, and destruction. I had chosen healing, love, and growth. Our paths had split long ago, and there was no crossing back. Not long after, I got a final call from my cousin. Mark had overdosed. He was gone. The news hit me like a cold wave, but instead of grief, what I felt most was finality. The chapter of betrayal, pain, and anger was truly closed. That night, I held Claire close, whispering a silent promise to never waste the second chance life had given me. My brother had ruined my past, but he would never own my future. After Mark's death, I found myself sitting in silence more often, not from grief, but from reflection. The boy I once called my brother had destroyed so much of my life, and in the end, destroyed himself. His choices were his downfall, and no matter how much I once loved him, I realized I couldn't carry that weight anymore. Claire stood by me through it all. On the nights I felt torn between anger and emptiness, she reminded me that I wasn't defined by betrayal, but by how I rose from it. With her, I learned to let go of the past without letting it poison my future. I visited Mark's grave once. No flowers, no tears, just a quiet moment to acknowledge the blood tie that had long since been severed. "You could have been my brother," I whispered, "but you chose to be my enemy." Then I walked away, leaving him behind one last time. From then on, my focus shifted entirely to the life I was building. I swore he'd never know betrayal the way I had, that he'd grow up in a home filled with trust and love. Looking back now, I don't see myself as a victim anymore. I see a man who was broken but rebuilt. My brother ruined my past, but he also taught me the most important lesson I'll ever carry. Sometimes, survival means cutting blood ties and creating your own family from the ground up. And with Claire, with the family we built together, I finally understood what real loyalty, love, and freedom feel like. Years later, when I look back at it all, it feels like a different lifetime. The pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights. It's like watching an old movie of someone else's life. But I carry the lessons in every decision I make now. Claire and I built a world that Mark and Emily could never touch. We traveled with our son, showed him the beauty of life, and taught him values rooted in honesty and love. Watching him grow, I often thought about the cycle of betrayal that ended with me. My brother's actions might have scarred me, but they would never reach my son. That legacy of hurt stopped in my generation. Sometimes, relatives still bring Mark up, speaking of him with pity, or whispering Emily's name as though they wonder where she ended up. I don't join in. To me, both of them are simply parts of a story that closed long ago. They're not villains I hate, or ghosts I fear they're just gone. What matters now is the life I chose after them. The nights I tuck my son into bed. The mornings I wake up beside Claire, grateful for a love that doesn't come with knives hidden behind smiles. The home we filled with trust, laughter, and resilience. In the end, betrayal didn't destroy me. It revealed me. It stripped away illusions and forced me to see who I really was and what I truly deserved. And now, standing where I am, I wouldn't trade my scars for anything. They're proof I survived. And more than that, they're proof I won. Looking back now, I realize that betrayal was never the end of my story. It was the beginning of the life I was always meant to live. My brother and Emily thought they had broken me, but all they really did was set me free from people who never truly valued me. I've built a life filled with loyalty, honesty, and love, the kind of life they could never understand. My son will grow up never questioning where he stands with his family, because he'll always know he's safe, protected, and loved unconditionally. The scars of betrayal will always be part of me, but they don't define me anymore. They remind me of who I used to be, and of the man I chose to become after losing everything. In the end, I didn't just survive. I rebuilt, I rose, and I created a future stronger than any past they tried to steal from me. That is my story, and it's proof that even in the ashes of betrayal, you can build a new life worth living. When I think about everything that happened, it feels like two different lives, the one before the betrayal and the one after. The first was filled with blind trust. with me believing that family and marriage were unbreakable bonds. The second was forged in fire, after those illusions were shattered by the people I trusted most. Mark stole more than my wife, he stole years of my peace. Emily didn't just betray our vows. She crushed the very foundation of who I thought she was. For a long time, I believed they had ruined me completely. But standing where I am now, I know they only cleared the path for something greater. Claire came into my life like light breaking through a storm. With her, I discovered what loyalty and love truly mean. Together, we built a family, a home filled with laughter instead of lies. Our son became my anchor, proof that the past didn't get the final say in my story. Mark's end was tragic, but it was his own doing. I couldn't save him, and I've made peace with that. Emily is nothing more than a memory, a reminder of the woman who chose betrayal over love. Neither of them hold power over me anymore. The truth is, betrayal doesn't end you, it reshapes you. It burns away the falsehoods and forces you to see who deserves a place in your life and who never did. I lost a brother. I lost a wife. But I gained something far more valuable. A future built on truth, strength, and love. And that is the life I will carry forward. Proof that even in the face of the deepest betrayal, you can rise again.